Where you been?
Hello and welcome to another edition of Hoosier Football Tailgate. And yes, the Bison is back as the Indiana Athletic Department did a great rollout of bringing back the Bison for the 2025 season. I know that a lot of people have asked and wanted for that to happen, and lo and behold, there it was. And I thought they did a great job with all that leading up to Huber's Winery NIL event, which was held last night. Drew Rosenberg is going to join us from the Hoosier.com here in a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about last night as well as we lead into what is on the docket here heading into a very important month for Indiana football and their coaches, but at the same time, a very, very, very busy month for the coaching staff and Coach Signetti as they try to get themselves ready, prepared to open up here not too long. I mean, we'll be rolling around here. It will be July. They'll be heading into camp and then hitting it off that last part of August there against Old Dominion there in Hoosier Stadium, and got a schedule release here we'll get to here in a second about all the different television games as well as that was released today. And so there's been a lot of news just in general here in the last 24 hours as it pertains to Indiana football and many different things with that, and enjoy you joining us here this evening. And again, Drew Rosenberg will be along here shortly from the Hoosier.com. I've had the nice aspect of being a part of the Hoosier.com is having these guys come on that you read about their articles, and some of them have their own podcast as well. So you get associated with them. They've done a great job throughout the last few months with basketball and football and everything that's going with that in terms of getting you up to date on recruiting and the portal and things of that magnitude. It's been a very busy time for them, and I appreciate them having the willingness to come on and talk to me this evening, as well as getting to know each and every one of them that we've talked to thus far here on the Hoosier Tailgate. Again, please do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Greatly appreciate that. It helps us with the algorithm there, especially when we can get as many guys subscribed to the Hoosier Tailgate there on the Hoosier.com, and then on my YouTube channel as well, the Hoosier Tailgate. Those things do help in terms of the algorithm and things of that nature. And then if you like to watch via or listen to the podcast on the different Spotify's and Apple Podcast and whatever you choose to listen to podcast, by all means, if you could do the same there, like it, subscribe to it, even if you can provide a brief review of the Hoosier Football Tailgate there, it greatly helps, especially on Spotify. And we want to be the number one source for everything Indiana football as we head in here to the month of June, as we leave May behind us here in a couple days. As again, want to thank our newest sponsor here of the Hoosier Tailgate, BetUS. BetUS is one of the best betting platforms you can find out there. They have all the different exotics as well as all the different lines, especially now with the NBA playoffs and the Pacers. Hopefully lock it up tonight in New York, as well as the NHL playoffs as we approach the Stanley Cup Finals. You can find everything there on BetUS. Remember, when you first sign up there, you get 125% return on your first cash deposit with BetUS using the code TAILGATE. Use the code TAILGATE. You'll get that 125% bonus on your first deposit with them. BetUS, the game starts there. And I appreciate their sponsorship of the Tailgate, as well as other affiliates that you can find on my link tree. You can find them there, and thehoosier.com has a list of those as well, with other tidbits as well. But the main website for all the information is thehoosier.com, powered by On3. Yeah, go Pacers tonight. It's going to be a great game for them, and hopefully they can get the series locked up tonight in New York, which will be a phenomenal effort for them, as they've taken 2 already there. So if they can wrap it up tonight and get into the finals, who knows what can happen? They're kind of a team of destiny right now, and it's one of those things as you get a chance, you never know what can happen in the finals if they play Oklahoma, which is probably going to be a pretty tough series, but who knows? Pacers have played well thus far. One thing that also came out today is the EA Sports trailer. I want to try to show you that here shortly. John says has a pretty good track record when it comes to quarterbacks. Fernando just may walk away. Well, there's no question that Fernando Mendoza will have an opportunity to show what he's got. He's going to have to compete each and every day for that position, as it's not just going to be something given to him, as Coach Signetti referenced yesterday at the Huber's event. And as soon as Drew comes on, we'll get to that. But it's one of those things that right now, Indiana is sitting pretty good with everything they've got in terms of where they're at with their incoming freshman classes. They've all come on campus. They're involved in the summer workouts. All the different upperclassmen are back actively involved with all that. So you got a lot of new faces around the program for the most part, and they're going through summer workouts right now. And this is where that team is right now in the summer months. Because they've only got themselves, and as well as sometimes they do get with the coaches and such. But, one thing I wanted to see tonight was this aspect of it. I'm going to show you this, if I can find it here real quick. The TV schedule coming up. As you can see, the Old Dominion game is a 2:30 kick. That will be on FS1. Kennesaw State is a noon kickoff on FS1 as well. Indiana State is going to be a night game and a Big Ten Network game carried that night, as well as the Iowa game will be a noon kickoff, and all those will be to be determined, with Michigan State as well being a potential noon kickoff, or the 3:30 game, which is slotted with CBS. So all the different times there. Of course, Purdue's 28th. That's going to be NBC's Saturday night main feature for that as well. So it's a pretty decent their schedule when it comes to all that. And I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic with that TV schedule, as well as a couple uncertainty of games there potentially as they get into the Big Ten, just like last year. You know, they could all of a sudden have a lot of noon kickoffs if things go well, and they become a target for one of those slots in the afternoon, which is great. The more exposure they can get on a national level definitely helps them more so than anything when it comes to all that. You know, I did tease you about the EA Sports trailer. We get some time tonight. Before we get out of here, I'll show it. I tell you, they do such a great job. What it's always amazes me is how realistic those games have become through the years. And this is a pretty darn good trailer. We get some time here at the end, as well as some discussion here as it pertains to the playoff format that they're talking already about in 2026, as they jump to, it looks like they're going to 16 teams, whether they're going to have a 16 team, the best 16 teams in there with no guarantees of how many from each conference get in, or they're going to go with that 4-4 allotment for the Big Ten, SEC, 2-2 for the Big 12 and the ACC. And then of course you've got one and then about three potentially at large is what it's looking like. But it sounds as if they're going to go right to 16 after the 2026 season. So that's going to be interesting as we head into that playoff scenario here in another year. But this year it's just the same as it was. It's a 12-team tournament, and we'll see where the chips fall as it pertains to how many of the Big Ten gets in, how many of the SEC's getting in. They've been very prominent on all the different channels. The commissioner for the SEC, who has been very outspoken about how good the SEC is. And I've also seen they're advocating in the future for each Big Ten team to play a crossover game against the SEC, which I do kind of like as a non-conference game. So we'll have to see if that comes to fruition or not. We're going to bring in our guest here real quick and see if I can get him up on the box here in a quick second. Let's see. There he is, bright and bushy-tailed. Drew, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Coach. Great to be on.
Great to have you on. It's one of those things that we've had all the different guys from the Hoosier.com since I've come over to join the crew there, and appreciate the work that you do, as well as Kyler and Zach and Alec and all of them. And of course, Jim Coyle, as he spearheads from afar, I guess you could say, in some respects. But you also have a podcast yourself in some respects when it comes to covering Indiana as a whole, but more basketball than anything. Is that correct, Drew?
Yeah, talking about the Hoosiers podcast on the Hoosier on 3 YouTube. Me and Kyler and Zach Browning talking Indiana basketball. We'll have some stuff about last night too, coming out probably tomorrow morning. So check that out too.
Yeah, we're going to get into some of that here a little bit too as well. But you guys have always done a great job. It's been a busy, couple months here with everything from a basketball standpoint. The football recruiting is still going on in a class that's looking pretty good. And then, of course, Coach DeVries trying to get his roster settled. And I think he's pretty much done. And if not, there may be one or two out there that he may ultimately like to have moving forward. But you guys have done such a great job of covering that. Usually, what time do you guys like to have your podcast come out?
It's usually Thursday mornings, or Thursday, Friday mornings, kind of just varies. Right now in the summer, it's a little iffy, just kind of whenever stuff kind of pops up. During the season, it's usually Thursday morning. So
Thursday mornings. All right. Now, where are you from originally?
I'm from Boston.
Boston. Oh my gosh. Didn't know I had a Boston guy in the house. Red Sox fan? I guess that's a stupid question. Bruins fan? What are we here? Bruins, Patriots, all above?
All above, all Boston.
Okay, well, I'm a hockey nut, so I'm very into the NHL playoffs at this moment, as well as the NBA, since the Pacers are involved in things of that magnitude. But do appreciate you coming on, Drew. And again, with us being live and such, what I try to do is if the guys in the chat have a certain question they want to bounce, they can. If it's football, great. Even if it's basketball, I don't mind, as we're kind of in that period of time right now where not everything is up and running football wise, but we let off tonight with the return of the Bison.
Yeah.
And I think the athletic department has done a great job in rolling that out thus far. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
And how well they've done with that?
I think it's been awesome. I know Jeremy Gray, he's kind of spearheaded a lot of the, the ideas. I saw some Nebraska fans weren't happy about the use of, I forget the name of the song for the last video, but that was really funny to me because it's like, no, Jeremy Gray even said, he was like, he got that from Michael Jordan and the Bulls. But
yeah,
it's long overdue. I know when I was a student at IU, everybody wanted the Bison back and wanted a mascot. And, the Bison's such a cool mascot. And having it back is, I don't know. I don't think it's going to change too much, surrounding the program. But it's a good energy to have in the building of Memorial Stadium and Assembly Hall.
Yeah, and I agree. The IU sports department just kind of never seems – and then that's the nice thing about it because – it goes a long way in promoting and putting your name out there in a top of mind marketing mentality. When you have football that's rolling, you got a new coach in basketball with things in a positive nature. You want to get yourself in that news cycle on a pretty regular basis, not just within the state, but outwardly as well, which is hugely important with all that. John asked the question, if SIG recruits 17 high school kids, does that mean Mendoza, Smith, Pons are coming back? Well, Mendoza has 2. Pons, I think, still has a couple years. I think it's going to determine, John, on how this year progresses, especially for the likes of Mendoza. There are some out there that think he is a potential first-round draft pick in some circles. We'll see what that ends. I think Pons is another one that's unique because of the year that he's had. Drew, you want to expand on that because I know that you've done a lot with writing about some of the things like Mendoza and that, but kind of anything that you'd like to add to that question?
Yeah, I think college sports today, it's a year by year thing. Like the transfer portal, high school recruiting, every single year is going to be completely different. Whether you're bringing in, 20 high school kids, I think Signetti mentioned, 17 to 20 potentially, and it kind of depends on the transfers, who comes back. And with a guy like Fernando Mendoza, I mean, as you know as well as I do, it all depends on this season. If he comes out, he's not, the guy everyone's expecting to be, he'll probably be back for another year. But if he's, as good as advertised, there's a very real chance he could be gone. D'Angelo Pons, another guy, really highly touted. The whole thing with Pons and his, draft status, it's the size. That's the biggest question mark with him. So kind of following that, it's, if he has another huge year and he sees he's going to be, a projected draft pick, maybe first 3-4 rounds, he easily could be gone. But again, it's a year-by-year thing. And Signetti's, he's recruiting these guys backups, and they're building a program on depth, not just starters, and having guys, ready to fill in once these guys are, go on to the next level. Yeah, and one thing to add there from the event last night, he made the comment, and this video is up on the Hoosier.com's web or YouTube page about having some guidelines with this NIL and aspects of how this is going to run, because it does affect the planning on who they may bring in as a true freshman or who they not bring in and things of that magnitude. So I know that's one frustrating point for SIG, is that
the unknown in that arena does have an impact on how they recruit incoming first years. So there's some things with all that. Jason, do you know Kimball Union Academy? I played there and went to school. Now, Jason, you got to refresh me. Kimball, I'm not quite sure about that. And if I had to, I'm not even going to guess, but in the back of my mind, I want to say that's out in Oklahoma, but I'm not positive on that one. You got me there. I usually know pretty much all the schools. If you ask me a lot of them, I would, but if you want to fill us in, we'll put you back up there. Terry wants to know, Drew, do you think Indiana left 5 unfilled scholarships so he can recruit up to 20 next year in addition to the portal, or could they just not fill those spots?
Yeah, I mean, I think they could just not fill those spots. I think it's one of those things. And we've seen a lot of coaches. I think it was Dillingham at Arizona State. He, let a lot of guys go to try to get under the projected what the limit's going to be. So until this house settlement comes in, it's going to be really hard to, determine a roster. And I know just hearing a lot of coaches across the country, they don't want to have, 15 extra guys they're going to have to cut in the fall and leave those guys without anywhere to go. So I think it's a little, pre-planning to an extent there.
Yeah, I know that one of the things with the house settlement is they're going to kind of gradually eliminate the additional bodies so they get down to 100 at some point in time. Now, coaches are already being proactive. A lot of those kids that they did have as walk-ons, or in some respects preferred walk-ons, may have transferred to other institutions knowing that they may not have a spot for them. And that's a big thing. So it's going to be interesting to see with the house settlement and stuff and go, kind of how that goes. And there, Jason, split scholarships give high school kid a chance to versus all the transfers. Yeah. And that's why SIG wanted this, they need the guidelines to really be given here in a significant short period of time so that they can formulate a game plan on how they're going to go recruit the next high school class that's already up to 10, and maybe how they address in projecting on who they may get coming back, who they might not get coming back, whether or not that's a spot that they go to discuss to get a portal guy. And that all is now in limbo until they get guidance with the NIL and such. And I saw something, Drew, the other day. Kirby Smart's already complaining, and I find it very ironic at Georgia, of all places, is he's mad because there's collectives out there that are paying the kids that have given their verbal commitment to a school upwards of $20,000 a month to keep their commitment to said school. Now, the kicker is if the kid would happen to decommit, they want their money back. So that'll be an interesting dynamic. I find it interesting and kind of a little bit of hypocritical because the P4 schools go and poach the MAC level schools all the time for kids that they passed on a year before or 2 years before, and they went into that mid-major level and lit it up. And next thing you know, they're competing in the Big Ten or the SEC, but already we're seeing money to maintain a commitment to an institution. And because you got to get them to December. And that's the whole thing with a lot of these recruits that Indiana has with these 4-star guys that are going to be highly recruited. They're going to be pressured to flip their commitment and stuff. There are institutions out there already paying $20,000 for a kid to keep his commitment. What's your thoughts on that one?
I mean, it's no secret. It's a mess right now. The transfer portal, NIL, high school recruiting. NIL has completely changed it. I thought Darren DeVries had a really good quote, and it relates perfectly to this. You're seeing guys with the house settlement, huge lump sum payments they're front loading these, NIL agreements where guys are getting $5 million on the spot to commit to a school because they know once, the rev sharing or whatever ends up happening with the settlement, they're not going to be able to get the same, NIL money that they would now. So you're seeing it's a mess right now. The settlement needs to happen because of like what you're saying, the $20,000 a month to keep a commitment it's ridiculous right now, and it's completely changed the way college sports act and are.
Well, yeah. And the other thing is, how is Deloitte going to value these scholarships these NIL deals that are 600 or more, because they got to go through an approval process. And, what are the guidelines to determine one's value? Is a running back at Tennessee worth more than a running back at Georgia because he can get, more money via NIL because he's got 5,000 more followers than the kid at Georgia. So how does that all, there's a lot of things in the underlying aspects of this that I don't think we'll ever understand, nor will we get a clear picture on, because it's all going to be too crazy in one respect to get a black and white letter of the law type of rule. And the fact is, these schools are breaking away from the NCAA. The NCAA will not have anything to do with the enforcement of everything from the House settlement. I don't know if that was well known enough, but all these schools in the P4s, they're pulling away from the NCAA and vice versa. And so they're going to have to kind of, I guess you could say, effectively rule themselves as a conference, as a P4 atmosphere, because the NCAA is not going to have anything to do with it. Your take on that aspect of everything that we're seeing with right now, with nothing in print, nothing in that you can go by.
Yeah, it's hard to follow just because college sports, it's if these schools are just deciding for themselves, obviously the SEC is going to have a lot of power. The Big Ten is still going to have the power. But it feels like almost pre-NIL, when there's a bunch of stuff going on under the table, when they're if these schools aren't, the schools are responsible for, settling how this stuff is going to run. You're going to see the SEC and the Big Ten say, hey, we can throw way more money than, say, an ACC school. And it's going to cause a kind of a ripple effect where you're seeing all these schools kind of filter in, and kind of what the SEC commissioner Sankey has been saying. It seems like we're going to lead to a college football playoff where you're getting like 6 SEC teams and 6 Big Ten teams, and then some filler teams from the other conferences, which I know Big Ten fans and Indiana fans would like to see Indiana in the playoff as much as possible, but from the sport as a whole, that's not where you want to go.
Right. Well, and the other thing with that is the fact that, until they get, how this is all going to play out, who is going to be that commissioner of these Power 4 leagues, because that hasn't even been established. You've got a whole office of personnel that's going to have to ultimately find out how this is all going to be. And we're going to be through a season, and this is not going to be settled. And they're going to beg the NCAA to take over for one more year. And the NCAA says, boys, we're walking. We don't want no part of this. Let's see. SIG has lost 4 games once, 5 games twice. In 14 years, I think he has the rules or lack thereof figured out. Well, he does a pretty good job of maybe playing dumb to a certain extent with some of that aspect of things. And but I take SIG as a type A type of personality, and that's kind of what I've gathered because of my relationship with Brian Haynes. He's very to the point. It's black and white, and he has a plan, and this is what we're doing. And because of this hang up with some of this stuff, it's affecting him because he's not able to lay out that blueprint that he talks so frequently about. But we'll have to wait and see as we transition here through the month of June. And let's talk a little bit about last night. Were you down there at Huber's?
I was not, but I did. I went through all the videos.
Yeah.
From it.
Well, first and foremost, that event has become a huge, huge event, not just from the standpoint of, coaches being there and players and fans and so forth and so on. It's now labeled as an NIL event where they get a significant amount from that event. that goes right in back to the Hoosier Connect aspect of it. So it's a very important part of the summer months. But I've never attended it. I've heard people that have talked about it, and it's such a beautiful venue, and it's they do a great job with it. Of course, the kids and things of that nature. I think Surratt was there last night, Aiden Fisher. Those were the two mostly that got interviewed, and there's been some things that I cut up on shorts that you can find on the Hoosier.com's YouTube page as well. But I do believe Mendoza was there. He never got interviewed per se, but let's talk a little bit about what you took away from that event last night, and football as a primary, but also don't be, shy to talk about the basketball side of it.
Yeah, I think it's an obvious one, but Signetti kind of, stated the obvious, the change in recruiting from, when he first took over here to now, where it's, when he first took over, it was a lot of promises and a vision, and it was trying to sell guys, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Now it's, look what I did last year. I'm going to keep doing this and build off that. And, we're seeing it in his recruitment. I think he mentioned he has at least 10 guys committed, but I think currently the list is 9, but there's a couple that haven't announced, so be interested to see that. But the change in recruitment is something, we saw it with Tom Allen. We saw it after Tom Allen's 2019-2020 season. Indiana had a really good recruiting class into 2021. So, that stuff tends to correlate together, but building off that and, having another productive year and, building off this and not having this be a one-off year. And I don't have any thought in my mind that it's going to be a one-off year, but the way Signetti, recognizes that change, and he's not oblivious, and he doesn't pretend that it's not there, because he knows it's there, and it's a good change for Indiana football.
Well, yeah, they're going to go from being the hunter to being the hunted. They're not going to sneak up on anyone this year, and they've got a 3-game stretch where they go, Illinois, Iowa, Oregon, they're right as the Big Ten season kicks off. That will tell us a lot in terms of their path this next year. The Illinois squad probably going to be in at least the top 10, 12 team in the country, potentially coming in. Indiana will probably be a top 25 team going into the season. So we're going to probably see 2 ranked teams teeing it up in Memorial Stadium when Illinois arrives. And then don't sleep on Iowa, because they've found themselves a quarterback that can throw it around a little bit, and they've always had a great defense. So that we're going to find out a lot there with all that from the season's perspective. But, I do think, and I think you alluded to this a little bit, Sig is, he has his Sigisms, I call them, be where your feet are, consistency and all that and those things. But here's the thing. He and his staff do a great job in communicating that aspect of their blueprint. And even those Sigisms, those kids repeat them. They talk about it. Aiden Fisher talked about it a little bit last night about the consistency aspect of things and wanting to elevate their game. From your perspective, being around those guys, has that blueprint mindset as something has sunk in with not just the guys that came with him, but the entire group of guys that are now Indiana Hoosiers?
Yeah, I think you see the buy-in from the top. Signetti, he's not just saying these things. He fully believes it with everything in him. Brian Haynes, Mike Shanahan, they also believe it, and it just trickles down from there. You're seeing the leaders, the Aiden Fishers, the Mikhail Kamaras, the Elijah Surratts, they believe it too, and it translates. There was a bunch of guys last year from the roster that weren't Signetti guys, and quickly, established that identity. How many times have we heard fast, physical, relentless from the defensive side of the ball? These guys, it's one thing to say the words, we remember the Leo, love each other, that stuff. It feels very different than that, because at the end of that, it was kind of, and we're just going to say it. These guys fully believe in Signetti and the process and what he's, going to do. And they understand he's not going to take any crap from anyone. He is, Signetti fully believes in himself and his process, and it translated. I remember Mikhail Kamara, I think it was after the Northwestern game last year, he talked about, yeah, being 6-0 is great, but who cares? I want to go to the college football playoff. I want to win a national title. And at the time you're like, okay, maybe get a little ahead of yourself. 4-0 haven't really proven, or 4 or 5-0 at the time hadn't really proven too much. But like, these guys fully believe in the process, and it's a huge change from what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and one of the things that he did emphasize in that, kind of the side presser there leading up to the event, he talked about the most important thing right now is they're emphasizing the conditioning, and the culture is a big part of their summer program with their players. Now that everybody is on campus and they're fully preparing for the 2025 season, and being in coaching as long as I have, these months leading up to camp are where you are going to determine what you are for the rest of the year, because it's vitally important that what they do now will pay off in week 3 and week 4 and week 5 down the road. And they've probably got one of the best strength and conditioning coaches in the country, and they were able to keep him here when USC came a calling, and Sig stepped up to the plate because he didn't want to lose one of those guys. But right now, it's a very important aspect of their month of June and July is, the emphasis on conditioning and culture, accountability, and daily competition. I mean, that's the one thing that they try to instill. That's instilled now. It's not instilled week 1 of camp. They're instilling that mindset right now, that each and every day you come in the weight room or you're running drills or whatever it is, you're accountable for your, being prepared to compete every day, and nothing is given. Everything is earned. And that mindset sinks in quickly, because these young bucks are coming in here and they want a chance to get on that field, and there's going to be some spots for that, and they're going to find out real quick if they're good enough, and that's one of the things that I think last year was the biggest thing for them. They won their season last year in the months of June and July because of what they were able to do in the mindset, not just the physical, but the mental approach to everything with that. So, what was your take on, his mindset too? And we maybe have alluded to a little bit of this, but Drew Rosenberg is here with us from the Hoosier.com. The mindset for being not being the one that's doing the hunting now, but they're the ones that are going to be hunted with the big bullseye on their chest. And, Old Dominion is going to come in here week 1 and anticipate that they can come in and disrupt Indiana's year by giving them a game, if not, mindset of beating them. And Kanawha State, those 2 games that most people say that's an L. You're writing, you're putting it in pencil. That's a dub. I mean, that's a W for Indiana. Kind of what was his take on, just that aspect of things heading into the 25 season?
Yeah, I mean, I like what Signetti kind of said. I think, paraphrasing, but it was, as a competitor, if you want everyone's best shot, last season, Indiana was the hunter. It was, you said it. They weren't, on the radar, preseason picked 17th in the Big Ten, and they were going out to prove people wrong. This year, it's every team that plays Indiana, for the most part, is going to give the Hoosiers their best shot. Indiana is, it's no longer a game teams are circling saying, oh, that's a win. It's a game teams are circling saying we have to play our best football if we're going to beat the Hoosiers, because Kurt Signetti is going to have them ready. And it's, it's a really good change. Kurt Signetti, it's funny to me because he reminds me of the Celtics head coach, Joe Mazzulla. They like their mannerisms and just kind of how they,
Yeah.
they talk. I don't know if you followed it much, but Joe Mazzulla before this season said something along the lines of about having the target on his back. He's like, I wanted him on my forehead. I want to see the red dot of teams, trying to hunt us. And Signetti kind of has that same mindset of, teams are going to come in, they're going to give us, their best shot, and they want to beat us. And, that's the way it should be. As a competitor, you want teams' best shots because you want to go out and beat everyone at their best.
Yeah, there's no question. His mindset is they can beat anybody, no matter where or it's at, home, away, in the parking lot. They fully believe in the value of themselves and that they can beat anybody. Whoever's vetting these players is worth their weight in gold. A year and a half and not one player has been on the police blotter. Knock on wood quickly, John. As a former college coach, when you could say that, that means that you have accountability within the ranks, meaning you've got guys taking care of each other, and they're not letting guys fall prey to things that they can control, because they know that doing something stupid not only has an impact on the person that's involved, but it has an impact on the entire organization. And they know they can't afford those type of slip ups. And that was a huge distraction in the basketball season, Drew. You can speak to that a little bit more about how being a headline on Saturday night, Sunday morning was a killer to anything that Indiana had from a win and loss column in basketball.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even off the top of my head. I can think of several different instances where you had guys suspended, involved with the police. I mean, you can mention Mackenzie Mbako right before the season, his incident. Xavier Johnson had an incident. I remember, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, road game at Northwestern where Indiana, had three of their normal rotation players who weren't suspended by the team for violation of team rules. And it's stuff like that I mean, it costs you, it kills you. Indiana wins that game if they're fully healthy 9 times out of 10. And instead you're playing walk-ons who haven't played a meaningful minute in their entire career because of that stuff. And it's, it seems so obvious, staying out of trouble and, like staying focused on the task at hand. But again, it's college. It's, these are 18 to 22-year-olds for the most part. This is a lot of their first times like on their own. So there is that growing curve. And with Signetti, we've seen it. I mean, the accountability is there. These players care. And it's from the top, the leadership. I mean, Aiden Fisher, Elijah Surratt, I think are perfect examples. Fisher talked about yesterday, just, showing the appreciation. It's a small thing for, the fans, a lot of players, they don't want to be bothered. They don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
But taking the time to individually talk to every single fan who is in attendance, because he knows how much, what he does on the field means to them and how much, their support means to him. So it's really good to see from the Indiana football program.
Well, they're role models. Whether you like it or not, as a college football player, you're a role model, and every eye is upon you, good, bad, or indifferent. And it's just not on the sidelines or in the game on Saturdays. It's 24/7, 365 with the world of social media, and everybody has a camera and things of that nature. And they've done a great job up to this point of keeping themselves out of the negative press and only having positive press in that regard. One other thing from last night at Huber's, there was a little bit of news, I guess you could say, as it pertains to the quarterback aspect of things. Thoughts on him? I'm going to jump over Fernando, but if we're going today, it sounds as if Alberto is going to be that second man behind his brother heading into the season. As Signetti said, nothing's given. It's every single day they're competing for the job, and just because Fernando is that guy at this point doesn't mean that anything's settled. But it sounds as if right now that Alberto, his brother, is going to be a backup.
Yeah, I think it's funny to see. I'm not surprised when you see, usually when you have two guys like Fernando Mendoza and Alberto Mendoza together, iron sharpens iron is the saying. And I think having those guys, it seems like Fernando talked about it in some of his press conferences when he was learning the playbook before he even got it because he was home with Alberto. And like that connection, they're probably going over film together, working on stuff in their own time. And it only makes them stronger as a program. I think you originally bring Grant Wilson in as a senior transfer to, be expected to be the backup. And it seems like that's not the case at this point. So I think it's good to see for the development because, there's some question marks about after Fernando Mendoza, who's the quarterback. The expectation was Tyler Cherry. if you were to ask this question a year ago, but now Tyler Cherry is injured and not currently on the roster. So there's a lot of question marks with him. So it's good to see, Alberto Mendoza kind of establishing himself in this quarterback depth chart.
Yeah. One man's misfortune is the other man's gain. Unfortunately for Tyler, he blew his knee out pretty significantly prior to the Notre Dame playoff game. He's going to miss this year. He's not on the roster because they can't waste a roster spot with everything the way it is coming into this year. But he is still involved in a coaching capacity as a student coach, which I think is great. And they're heavily recruiting his brother as well, who's down to 3 schools, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Purdue. So I got a feeling he may be one of those unannounced commitments coming down the pike here pretty quickly, is what I'm guessing. I hope so, because he's a heck of a ball player. And just going back here through some of these questions that we were strolling through there. Yeah, the social media aspect last year, basketball-wise, was not very good. There was a lot of, I guess you could say, Twitter warriors out there in some respects in terms of, being called out and stuff. Now, hey, look, Dockage is a guy that, he's going to call a spade. In some respects, he's like Cignetti. He's, spade, he's a black and white guy. Now, Cignetti is, I'm not trying to say that they're similar in that respect of how they talk about stuff, but when you have guys in Twitter wars with a former coach / player of a very good Indiana team when he was around, is not a good look. And those kids need to put the keyboards down. And that's one thing that Cignetti has a pretty good control over. I told this story, I think, in the last season, but Curtis Rourke, he is not active on social. He was not active on social media during any of these seasons as a quarterback because it's too distracting, and he's on point. And so I'm guessing that that's something that is preached more so as a expectation from the coaching staff, is you stay off Twitter, you stay off X, you stay off Instagram, you stay off all that stuff. But I know even you probably have a feeling on the Twitter aspect of things from last season, either, even football, basketball, however you want to look at it.
I mean, let's call it how it is. Twitter, it's a toxic place. It's only gotten worse as the years have gone on. And I think anytime, you see athletes staying off it, it's always, a good sign because, it shows, they're focused. And obviously being on Twitter does not mean you're not focused. I'm not saying that. But when you are getting into these, internet battles and, arguing with guys like Dan Dockich and other commentators or media, it's, it's not doing anyone any good, And I mean, I don't agree with most of what gets said on Twitter at this point from either side. It's important to stay focused on the task at hand and focus on what's going on inside, your building. Like Curt Cignetti has talked about it. He doesn't care about the outside noise. He cares about what's going on in the inside the walls of Mellencamp Pavilion and Memorial Stadium. And those, that's what you need to be focused on as a player, especially at this point of the year. I mean, you mentioned it. This Indiana football team is getting, they're getting a lot of hype right now. There's a lot of praise, and it could be very easy as a player to see that and be like, "Oh, okay, I can coast a little bit. We're going to be a top 25 team. I don't need I can take this day off." And it's staying locked in and kind of ignoring the noise, whether good or bad. And I mean, you mentioned Curtis Rourke. It clearly goes a long way for certain guys.
Absolutely, and that's the one thing of that. Leadership brings to the table is when you're living out exactly what you're saying you're doing. And I think they've got those type of guys within the locker room, again, taking care of one another, and that's accountability. And when you have it, it goes a long way in terms of how your season's going to go for you. When guys are accountable to each other and as a group and individuals and things of that nature, it's vitally important. Well, let's jump a little bit ahead here. I don't know, did you see any final amount that was raised from last night's event for Hoosier Connect or anything of that nature?
I did not. I'm not sure what the total was.
I'm sure they'll put something out in a short period of time. But again, it's a NIL driven event that they try to get a lot of people involved in terms of committing to the Hoosier Connect, the major collective. And like I said, every dollar counts. And just because you may not have $50K to throw around, even doing a $500 pledge goes a long way, because you talk about the volume of people. If you get a lot of people that can do $250, $100 even, it goes a long way. And don't ever think it won't, because that's the thing that's going to put Indiana over the top with a lot of things, is that the more people that get involved with it and make commitments, whether it's $100 or $200, or if you can do $500, it goes a long way in terms of what they're able to offer kids. And that's the world we live in. And just like you said with Twitter, it can be a toxic place. These guys are, in some respects, professional athletes. When you really truly think of it, they're going to take the good with the bad. You're going to get praised when things are going well, and you're going to get hammered when things are not going well. And that's just the way it is in this this time period that we are right now. But let's get into what you're, kind of see what is happening now. And it comes to the month of June leading up into July, as they get ready for camp starting that end of July. Talk about some things that in your mind right now is the important aspect of this month coming in.
I mean, obviously it's building, it's building, because there's a lot of new guys coming in. It's building that chemistry, both on and off the field. But you mentioned it. I mean, these are the months where you're winning games in week 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the months those games are won. And it's really big to see that. But something I'm kind of following, I'm not sure how, if you are as well, but the offensive line, it seems like you have 6 guys where it's 6 guys who could easily start. I mean, I think when you look at the line, I think Carter Smith is the one that's like a lock for sure, and Pat Coogan are probably the 2 locks to start. But, who starts at the guards? Is Bray Lynch and Drew Evans going to start? Evans coming off that injury. And then you have Zen Mikowski, Khalil Benson. There's 6 guys and there's 5 spots, and you have 6 capable guys. And it's something I've talked about a lot this offseason. I think the Indiana offensive line is going to take a step, as good as they were last year, against the Notre Dame, against an Ohio State, against even Michigan. We saw there's kind of levels to it, and, the offensive line struggled. So seeing, how they're able to perform against the best of the best, but I think adding, guys like Zen Mikowski, Khalil Benson, former Indiana Hoosier back from Colorado, and Pat Coogan, I think it's going to go a long way, but I am curious to see, who Bob Bostad kind of trots out week 1.
Well, I don't think there's any question that when Indiana mentions the offensive line, it's always been in a negative arena, just because they either don't have the depth, or what they have is maybe not up to a Big Ten standard. What Coach Bob Bostad has done up to this point with the offensive line is nothing short of a miracle, and how he's put together a consistent product on the field each and every week that's been very good. I do think they're much improved with what they've brought in. I do think they have as many as 7, 8 guys deep, which is something that they've never had. And I do believe the 5 guys they put out there from tackle to tackle are going to be a bona fide Big Ten offensive line, something that Indiana hasn't seen in a long while. I mean, Coogan, 6'5", 320, I believe. I mean, and he's the center. What was Kadick at? Kadick was what, a 6'2", 6'3" guy in that regard, in some respects. So you can see how that alone is going to be a huge, huge deal. But I don't think there's any question that Indiana's offensive line is going to be one of their strengths as a unit heading into the season. Now, injuries at that position, unfortunately, have bit them in the out of camp. And they've lost some guys in camp before that they were counting on, and they get thrown a curveball. So that question will ultimately be solved or answered in a firm sense at the end of camp, heading into game week versus Old Dominion in that regard. But yeah, I agree with you with, where is it going to be? Because on paper it looks good. There's no question on paper it looks good. And even some of the guys that they've brought in that are the young bucks that are sitting in the back rows of the line, maybe in that second tier, are pretty darn good ball players themselves. So it's interesting to see. It's exciting to see that we're talking about offensive line in a positive, not a negative. And there's no question. What are some other things this month in your mindset outside of, just kind of what you spoke of there, is going to be at the forefront of this Hoosier football team, both not just from a player's perspective, but a big month right now for high school recruiting with camps. You got a lot of one-a-day camps. You got guys that are coming in on official visits as well. There's a lot of things going on top of preparing for the season. And I think Sig said last night he gave their coaching staff off until Tuesday, and they were back in the office Wednesday from this Memorial Day weekend at full speed ahead, getting ready for the season, all the camps that they're going to be involved in recruiting, as well as these official visits. So talk a little bit about that from, in your mindset, recruiting wise, and things that you possibly see here on the Hoosier.com coming up this month.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. There's a bunch of camps, obviously, is going to highlight, but a ton of official visits. Indiana's going to be hosting a ton of key guys. We'll have all of that stuff on the Hoosier Hangout. Steve Wiltfrong does a great job of covering nationally, but he posts a ton in the Hoosier Hangout, so make sure you're checking that out. But, it's taking an advantage because, Indiana football is in a really good place. You're kind of, you're in a positive direction. Obviously,
yeah.
Had a really, really great season last year, and it's building off that. Already landed some really, good commitments already, and you're building, for the future because you and I know it's, obviously the transfer portal, you can reload a ton, but if you're filling, replacing 8 to 10 starters in the portal each year, it can become really difficult. You got to build from the ground up, and Signetti, this is where the grunt work's done, to build a program where you are consistently churning out talent and where, an injury doesn't cost you your season. I mean, look at last year, Drew Evans goes down right before the Michigan game. And yeah, you played your, the 3 toughest defensive lines after that game, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame. But even against the offensive line, I don't want to say struggled, but it was not nearly as good after that injury. And it's just, you mentioned it. It's a lot more depth on the offensive line already this year than last year. But just across the board, having that depth and having younger guys, hey, you can trust. You look at last season, the linebacking core, Aiden Fisher and Jalen Walker, you really, didn't go too deep past them. Isaiah Jones and Elijah Hardy, we saw action from them, but building that depth where you have guys not only you trust, but are capable and, can be positives and pluses on the field because, it's 11 guys. It's not, one guy isn't going to win you a game, but winning your matchup and being a plus and as many positives on the field at once, it goes such a long way. And having that depth is, it comes from right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think, the defensive side of the ball, they answered some of the questions they needed to, especially up front along the defensive line. I think Kellen Wyatt, the kid from Maryland, is a big steal for them this year. I do think he'll be a huge, huge addition because Kamara's moving over to that, kind of that odd linebacker spot where he can be a stand-up guy or hand in the ground guy. Their secondary, I think, is going to be awesome. I think they're going to be able to do some more man stuff this year than they were last year because they just didn't have the capability at one corner to play a lot of man coverage. And so they played a lot of zone and combination coverage, but I do think they'll do better there. When you talk about high school recruiting, one thing that I think Indiana has been able to do with what they did last year, they have immediate brand awareness. So whatever school they walk into, Indiana football's brand awareness is way up in terms of how kids see them and getting to the national playoffs in year one, being 11-1, the excitement that's centered around that. And they've done a great job to a certain degree with in-state talent. And because of that brand awareness, they're able to go in and keep some of these Indiana kids at home. And there's always going to be some big time talent in Indianapolis, in the Fort Wayne area, up in the region. There's pockets of, there's going to be P4 guys. And I think because of brand awareness, especially in the state of Indiana, has been a huge, huge benefit for them when you talk about this class coming up because of who they've got thus far. So, and I don't think it hurts them, either when they're out in Florida or down in Georgia or up the East Coast. I think that brand awareness has been huge, and that's why we're seeing some of the guys that we're seeing or you're writing about having interest in Indiana. And when Steve Wiltfong is talking about Indiana recruiting, you're talking about a national commentator about recruiting. His expertise is national recruiting, and guys that are no doubters in my mind that he's talking about Indiana in that sense of they got a shot at, this guy or that guy. And this month of June, it'll be a huge, because it's going to not just be for this season, but you got to talk about the 26th, this 26th class, 27th, the 27th class, and the 28th class. That's the crazy thing about the month of June and how they recruit. That's why being involved with the Hoosier.com and getting that subscription, getting that first month for $1 and 50% off for the rest of the first year is a great deal, because you get all the On3 stuff in terms of NIL evaluations and things of that nature, but you get everything from the Hoosier.com and you guys' stuff that you're going to be writing about this month. So get on over there today and get that subscription. Let's see, interesting stat in the 2 losses in closer games. We played 50 players, and the blowouts, they played 60 plus. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a very, a common thing. The closer the games are, you're not going to get into your depth as much as you'd like to in that regard. But what's your viewpoint with in-state recruiting? And Sig said something about this last night as well, is he feels that they're making headway in the state of Indiana.
Yeah. I mean,
what's your take on it?
Yeah. Like he said, Indiana, it's, the IU is establishing themselves as, I don't want to say it, a powerhouse, but is, the school to beat when it comes to a lot of these in-state recruitments. For years it was, Purdue, Notre Dame, the top players weren't going to Indiana. And for obvious reasons, the program struggled, the brand wasn't great. And Cignetti has done such a good job rebuilding the brand where these top recruits in the state aren't just saying, I'm going to go to Purdue, Notre Dame, or, another Big Ten school or another school across the country. I'm going to stay in state and play for Indiana. And we're seeing, I think in the 2026 class, I think we have Casimir Hicks, Trevor Gibbs, and Blake Smythe, a few already. And, right now, 2026, if Indiana stays on the trajectory they are and continues to, be at the level of, consensus top 25 team, it's only going to get better year after year. Last year was probably, if Cignetti, stays at this trajectory, last year will probably be the worst recruiting year Cignetti has. And I think currently On3 Industry has Indiana's 32nd ranked team. I think that's the best class since like 2022, I want to say, which is immediately after Tom Allen's, 2 big seasons with Indiana. So you see that it happens, but it's maintaining that. And, on-field results are going to go such a long way, but you also see the investment in the facilities. Mellencamp Pavilion has, brand new turf. I think there was talk about the lights being replaced as well. I don't know if you've been in there, but the lights used to be very loud. So, they might seem like little things, new turf, new lights, but it goes such a long way in the recruitment of these guys and landing these in-state, because there is talent in-state for Indiana, and landing those and keeping them in-state will go such a long way for this program.
Absolutely. Drew Rosenberg, I thank you for being with us here tonight to talk a little ball. We'll get you back when we get things rolling around and, try to get something maybe together here as we lead up to camp as well as the season. But I appreciate you stopping by the tailgate and bestowing your wisdom on the Indiana Hoosiers, and we'd love to have you back sometime.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Coach.
Drew Rosenberg from thehoosier.com. Appreciate him joining us. Going to step aside here for 1 second as we have a little bit of money that we have to take care of here. From
Hoosier Football Tailgate is sponsored by BetUS. Use promo code TAILGATE and receive a 125% bonus added to your first deposit. BetUS is where the game starts.
Yeah, BetUS, appreciate them being a part of us this year. And I want to see if we can throw up some of the aspect of this EA Sports deal. And I'm trying to get to it right now. Let's see if we can get there. There we go. I'll let this run a little bit just to get an insight of it.
Friday nights to Saturday lights, Chapel Hill to Pasadena, it crackles down our spines. Tradition, tension, roars that remind our rivals they're not in Kansas anymore. It's electric. It shocks our nerves and ignites a place where the ground shakes. But our pride doesn't. Where our coach, scheme, playbook, and character are unlike any other. There's something in the air. It builds us up, breaks them down, and gives the stadium a pulse built on pride.
You got to say that doesn't get you fired up in the month of June, but I'm not a gamer, but I'm sure there are a lot of guys out there that have been waiting for this game to come out, and even the kids that are playing now, because they get a little chunk of the action for all that. And but as you can tell, we're on the cusp of the 2026 season. 25 season upon us, and a lot of things that are going to happen between now and then. I do want to thank Drew Rosenberg again from thehoosier.com for joining us here this evening. And most of all, thanks for you joining us here this evening, as well as these lives are important to have, especially for guys that want to come along and ask a couple of questions here and there. And as we go on the season, we're still going to plan to have them each and every week. Two tailgates in season, Mondays and Thursdays, but for now we're hitting it just once a week. Get on over to thehoosier.com and pick up that subscription. $1 for the first month, 50% off for the rest of the year. And remember, BetUS on your first deposit, 125% of that deposit for you to do a little gambling as we head into this great month of June, with NBA playoffs, NHL, you got Major League Baseball, you name it. There's a lot out there to have a little fun with it. But again, I appreciate you joining us. But for now, I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith. This has been the Hoosier Football Tailgate right here on thehoosier.com, powered by On3.